Okay, it's part 2, and I'm back again. It's only been about 2 hours since I shot part 1, and it's cold out here. I don't know if you noticed I was talking a little rapidly in part 1 and maybe shaking a little bit, but it's probably about 30 degrees right now, and here in the Northwest, it's been down in the low 20s and teens the last 3 or 4 days. And this wagon, as far as I know, has been sitting about 4 months and has not run. So we've had the battery on the charge about an hour and a half, and I thought I should just film the initial attempt, okay? If you guys know about diesels, you know how bad it can be when it gets this cold, even on a diesel that's a daily driver, let alone some engine that's been sitting for 3 or 4 months. So this is going to be a really good test, people. I mean, if we can get this engine started at this temperature and how long it's been sitting with an old, tired battery, we might have something here we can work with. So let's look at this together and see if we can get this thing to fire. Okay, right off, I can tell you we got a little sticking key problem here. I'm going to have to wiggle the key to get it to turn. Now, come on, let's go. All right, there we go. Let's put it on the glow cycle. Hey, look at that, the radio came on. Okay, glow light went off. Let's crank. Oh, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. Look at that. I mean, it's got a little clanking and rattling. That's probably injector noise, but this thing is running. I cannot believe it. Now let's go back inside and talk about this a little more. I'm not going to sit outside here in this cold weather and lecture you on what we've got going here. Okay, one more thing before we go inside. I've let the engine warm up here about 2 or 3 minutes, just to let it build up some oil pressure, kind of get lubricated. But I thought let's race it up and see how it sounds. Well, we got belt noise. You know, other than the belt noise, that doesn't sound too bad. Obviously, it's going to need some tuning, but I think we might have a winner here. I just turned the key off and the engine won't shut off. You know, that's a pretty common problem with these. So we'll reach in here and hit the emergency shut off, and it shuts off with authority. You know, if you've watched any of my other videos, I use that as a clue to tell how good the compression is by how abruptly the engine will shut down. You can kind of feel that kickback that shows that it has good compression. So now, let's go back inside and we'll talk a little bit more about this. Okay, I'm back in the shop and I think I've warmed up here, so it gives me an opportunity to ponder what we have outside in that 300 TD wagon. You know, I've been around a lot. You can't believe how many of these diesels I've started up that have been sitting a long time. Some of them won't fire. In fact, one of the tricks I use on engines that have sat for 6 months to a year, because this is what happens. When those engines sit a long time and they have excessive cylinder wall and piston ring wear, the oil will drain away from the rings. You have to remember that oil is providing some of the seal for the compression stroke. And when all the oil drains away and you try to start the engine, it's not going to have enough compression to fire the fuel air mixture. So what I've done in the past is I'll take I make up this concoction of STP and oil and kind of mix it 50-50, and I pull the injectors out, I pour it down in the injector holes, and then I crank the engine over to make sure I blow out the excess so I don't have hydraulic lock, and then I put the injectors back in. Hopefully that motor honey or STP and oil mixture has gone around and seeded the rings a little bit so I get enough compression to get the engine started. Once you get the engine started, you'll build back up that oil seal and the engine might be fine. It's not going to be like a new engine, but at least it's going to start and run. But when you have a diesel engine that has sat as long as that engine has sat, obviously the oil's drained away from the piston rings, and you know, it's got old fuel in it, and a tired battery was flat in that thing, and to have it fire up like that, I mean, a lot of times you'll crank and it'll sputter and it'll pop and bang, and then you'll glow it again and you'll crank and finally get it running. And once you get it running and shut it down, it'll start easier the more you drive it, because eventually you're going to kind of get that engine to set back in place, so to speak, because it has been sitting so long. So that's a really good sign. I can't jump the gun here and say, oh yeah, I got it. It's going to require, pulling the valve cover, doing a valve adjustment, and then we'll do a compression check on the engine to make sure. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then we can start tuning it. And that'll be, looking at the injector nozzles, testing the fuel injectors, reaming the carbon out of the glow plug holes, giving it a good diesel purge. Those are all things that I can do for him for a reasonable cost, and probably have to change those V-belts, of course. Then we'll check, all the fluids and everything, and then I can get it out on the road and give it a test. Then we'll really know. We'll really know just how healthy the mechanical part of that car is. But I'm hopeful here. In fact, I'm hopeful we may have a 20 or 30 part video series in the making if we get into this wagon and start fixing a lot of things for the owner, so that it makes a good daily driver. We're not gonna restore the car. If I say restore, I'm gonna put that in quotes, because the goal is to make it into a good, reliable daily driver. So I think we're gonna see part 3 when we get this car in the shop, and I feel there's an opportunity to show you something of interest as we start working through this engine. I'm going to come on, you'll see part 3, and I'm sure there's going to be part 4, 5, 6, 7, so just stay tuned.